Welcome, everybody. Today, I would like to talk about a second generation crisis model. And let's have a quick view through the slides. So, like you can see here, like a payoff matrix. So it seems to be the case that we are looking at a game theoretic setting and different scenarios play a role. Like here, we have a scenario with high reserves and then low reserves and medium reserves. So like overall, like three scenarios seem to play a role. Let's have a look at the assumptions. Like we have three players, like the central bank, and two speculators, like two financial agents. And the central bank wants to defend a fixed exchange rate of €1 for $1. The central bank has reserves of R. So we are looking at it from like a European perspective. And the central bank which is acting might be the ECB. And the ECB has foreign exchange rate reserves like US dollar. The central bank intervenes until the reserves are equal to zero. Afterwards, the fixed exchange rate system breaks down and the central bank switch from a fixed to a floating exchange rate system. Each financial agent has a portfolio of €6, and the financial agent can hold the €6 denominated in euros or switch to the US dollar. In case that the financial agent switches to the US dollar and afterwards back, it will lead to transaction costs of €1. We have a non-cooperative symmetric game, simultaneous moves, and a game without repetition. And then we are going to look at the three scenarios A to C, and each scenario varies with respect to the reserve level of the central bank. In scenario A, we are assuming that the central bank is endowed with high reserves. R is equal to $20. In case that the two financial agents hold the euros, nobody wins, nobody loses, and the payoff for the two players is equal to €0. If one player holds and the other one sells, then the seller exchanges €6 into $6. The reserves of the central bank is down from 20 to 14, but the exchange rate system is stable because the central bank is not running out of reserves. The seller has to pay the €1 in transaction cost, and the payoff is a negative €1. If both players sell, then both players exchange €6 to $6. The reserves are down from 20 to 8. But the exchange rate system also here is stable because the central bank is not running out of reserves. The transaction costs are equal to €1, so the payoff is minus €1 for each player. So like this is our first payoff matrix. In case that both players sell, they have this transaction cost of €1. And if agent 1 holds and agent 2 sells, then it is a case that agent 2 has transaction costs of 1 and agent 1 has a payoff of 0. If both agents hold, then it's 0-0. Great. Let's check whether one of the player has a dominant strategy. What if agent 2 plays hold? Like, what is the best response of agent 1? In case that agent 2 plays hold, agent 1 has to compare the black 0 and the black -1. The black 0 is larger, so hold would be like the best response in case that agent 2 plays hold. What if agent 2 plays sell? Then the black player has to compare the 0 and the -1. The 0 is larger, so agent 1 will also play hold in case that agent 2 would play sell. So irrespectively of what agent 2 is opting for, it is the case that hold is always the best response. Therefore, agent 1 has like a dominant strategy to play hold. Since the game is symmetric, like the two players are modeled in the same way, also like Agent 2 has a dominant strategy, and therefore like the outcome of the game will be like hold, and the left upper cell is equilibrium of this game, and it is also like the Nash equilibrium. Let's switch to scenario B. The central bank only has low reserves of $6. If both players hold, then nobody wins, nobody loses, and the payoff is equal to €0. If one player holds and the other one sells, we are assuming that the seller exchanges the €6 into $6. The reserves of the central bank are down to zero, and therefore the fixed exchange rate system breaks down. The central bank switches from a fixed to a floating exchange rate system, and the new exchange rate level is 1.5 euros per US dollar. So a depreciation of the domestic currency, a depreciation of the euro takes place. Afterwards, like the financial agent can exchange the $6 back into €9, and the seller has to pay transaction costs of €1. So the payoff for like this player is equal to like €2. What if both players sell in this scenario? If both players sell, they can only exchange €3 into $3. €3 are kept denominated in euros. Both agents would like to exchange even more, but the reserves of the central bank are limited. The reserves are down to zero. The exchange rate system breaks down. Switch from the fixed to the float exchange rate system, and the new exchange rate level is 1.5 euros per US dollar. Each trader exchanges afterwards like the $3 back into 4.5 euros, and the trader has to pay the transaction cost of €1. So in the end, each trader has like €3 because €3 were kept denominated in euros, then 4.5 euros from this transaction, and the financial agent has to pay the €1 transaction cost. So the trader ends up with 6.5 euros. The trader started with €6 in the pockets, ends up with 6.5, so the profit, the payoff is equal to 0.5 euros. So this is now our like adjusted payoff matrix in scenario B with low reserves. Let's check whether there is a dominant strategy. What if agent 2 plays hold? Then agent 1 has to compare the black 0 and the black 2. 2 is larger, so sell is the best response in case that agent 2 plays hold. What if agent 2 plays sell? Then agent 1 has to compare the black 0 and the black 0.5. 0.5 is larger, so selling is like the dominant strategy. Since the game is symmetric, also agent 2 will always opt for the sell strategy. So the equilibrium is the right lower cell, and this cell is also like the Nash equilibrium. Let's switch to the last scenario, to scenario C, where the central bank has medium reserves. So R are equal to $10. It already becomes clear that the system only breaks down when both players attack, but the system will be stable when like one player attack. One player is not large enough to attack the central bank. So in case that both players hold their portfolio, nobody wins, nobody loses, payoff is €0. If one player holds and the other one sells, the seller exchanges €6 into $6. Reserves are down from 10 to 4. the central bank is not running out of reserves and the exchange rate system is stable. Seller exchanges $6 to €6. The seller pays the transaction costs of €1, and this is like the payoff for the player who is selling. If both players sell, we are assuming that both players exchange €5 to $5. €1 is kept denominated in euros. The agents would like to exchange even more, but the reserves of the central bank are limited. The reserves decrease to the level of 0. The central bank switches from a fixed to a floating exchange rate system. So the fixed exchange rate system breaks down and the new exchange rate level is at 1.5 euros per US dollar. The depreciation of the euro takes place. Afterwards, each trader can exchange like $5 into 7.5 euros. Each trader pays the transaction cost of €1, and each trader ends up with like €1 because this was kept denominated in euros, then 7.5 euros from this transaction, and each trader has to pay the transaction cost of €1. So the trader ends up with 7.5 euros. He started with 6, ends up with 7.5, so the payoff is 1.5 euros. So this is now our payoff matrix in scenario C. Let's check whether like agent 1 has a dominant strategy. What if agent 2 plays hold? Then agent 1 has to compare like the black 0 with the black -1. Black 0 is larger, so in case that agent 2 plays hold, like the best response is also to play hold. What if agent 2 plays sell? Then the black player has to compare the black 0 and the black 1.5. Black 1.5 is higher. So in case that agent 2 plays sell, then agent 1 also plays sell. So there is no dominant strategy. When agent 2 plays hold, the best response is to play hold. And when agent 2 plays sell, the best response is to play sell. So there is no dominant strategy and like no equilibrium in dominant strategies. So now we have to test whether like a Nash equilibrium exists. We could, for example, ask, is this one here a Nash equilibrium? -1 and the 0, the left lower cell. Is it a Nash equilibrium? What if agent 2 plays hold? Is it the best response of agent 1 to play sell? Or is there an incentive to switch the strategy? There is an incentive to switch the strategy because then the payoff would increase from -1 to 0. Therefore, the left lower cell is not a Nash equilibrium, and also the right upper cell is not a Nash equilibrium. What about the left upper cell? Is this a Nash equilibrium? What if agent 2 plays hold? Is there an incentive for agent 1 to switch strategies? No, because the payoff would decrease. What if agent 1 plays hold? Is there an incentive for agent 2 to switch strategies from hold to sell? No, because then the payoff would decrease from 0 to -1. So the left upper cell is a Nash equilibrium. What about the right lower cell? Is this a Nash equilibrium? Yeah, seems to be the case because when agent 2 plays sell, then agent 1 has no incentive to switch from sell to hold. Also, when agent 1 plays sell, there is no incentive that agent 2 switches from the sell strategy to the hold strategy because the payoff would decrease from 1.5 to 0. So here it is a case that we have two Nash equilibria. like the upper left cell and like the lower right cell. So we have two equilibria here. In the scenario C, we have two Nash equilibria. So we have multiple equilibria. And we have self-fulfilling expectations. So in case that the agents expect that the system is stable, the system will be stable and both players hold their portfolio. But when the agents expect that the system is unstable, then the agents will both sell and attack the fixed exchange rate system. In case that the expectations change from no crisis is expected to crisis is expected, the exchange rate crisis can fall from heaven. So it might be the case that no important macroeconomic variables are released. So there was no announcement with respect to the inflation rate, no announcement with respect to unemployment rates or GDP growth rates. Yeah, it is just the case that the expectations switch from no crisis to crisis, and the crisis occurs and falls like from heaven. There might be no change in observable fundamentals, but a crisis occurs because the expectations have switched. So, a second generation crisis models emphasizes the role of expectations in scenarios with multiple equilibria. The crisis does not need to occur, and this is a big difference compared to a first generation crisis model, where the crisis has to occur because a bad macroeconomic policy is in place. In a first generation crisis model, we were able to determine the exact point in time when the crisis occurs, and this is not possible in a second generation crisis model because of the fact that a crisis doesn't need to occur. It might be the case that the agents stay like in the left upper cell like forever. This is like one important result of this kind of model class. I would like to go back and emphasize once more under which conditions we derived this result. So we said it's a non-cooperative game and it's a symmetric game. What does it mean, symmetric game? Like a symmetric game implies that the two players are the same, like they have the same size. This is an important assumption. So, for example, when we have one big player, when we have one Soros, and the one Soros like has 11 US dollar, while a small player only has one, like the big Soros has 11 euros portfolio, and a small player has €1 portfolio. Yeah, of course, like the big Soros can like speculate against the scenario, and even in scenario C, like the fixed exchange rate system would break down. So one Soros, like one big player, definitely makes a difference, and so this assumption here, we have a symmetric game, is very important. Then we also assumed that we have a non-cooperative game. So the two players are not talking to each other. And this is also to some extent not very realistic. When we are looking at this scenario here, it is the case that we have one scenario where the system is stable and the payoff for the two players is equal to 0. And in case that the two players attack the central bank, then the payoff for the players is positive. So the big question is, like, why is it not the case that the two agents are gathering like in a bar and they are coming up with a plan to attack the central bank. So when the two agents cooperate, then it is much more likely that the central bank will be attacked and that the system will be unstable. Furthermore, like we also assumed in the beginning, that we have a simultaneous game. And in the simultaneous game, we are working with this payoff tables. And there it was a case that we had like two Nash equilibria. Now I would like to relax this assumption and would like to check what is the outcome in case that there is a sequential game. Like once more, we have two players, A and B. Player A is the first mover and can decide to hold or to sell. Afterwards, player B has to think about to hold or to sell, to hold or to sell. What is the equilibrium in this game? We have to perform like the solution method of backward induction. So player A has to build expectations. How will player B decide in the future? So what if player A sells? How will player B decide in the future? So player B has to think about 0 or like 1.5. 1.5 is higher. So in case that player A has opted for sell, player B will not hold, but will also opt for sell. So we can rule out this payoff here. We can rule out this strategy option. Player B will not hold in case that player A has attacked. Next one, what if player A plays hold? How will player B decide afterwards? Player B will compare the red 0 and the red -1. Red 0 is higher, so we can rule out this strategy option. Player B will not play sell in case that player A holds. Now it is the case that we have analyzed the behavior of player B in the future, and agent A can decide whether he wants to end up with 0 or with -5. So player A is comparing the black 0 and the black 1.5. The 1.5 is higher, so we can rule out like that player A plays hold, and like the equilibrium is both players sell. So like in a sequential game, it is the case that this Nash equilibrium here is not sub-game perfect. It is the case that we have a single outcome, a single equilibrium, which is sub-game perfect, and hence the system will be attacked and the exchange rate system is not stable. So this decision tree and the analysis emphasize that the assumptions we made in the beginning are very important. So non-cooperative is very important because when the two players are acting together, the outcome will be clear. Also, symmetric game is important. When we have differences in sizes, like a big player can make a difference. Furthermore, like the assumption of a simultaneous game is also important. In a sequential game, it is the case that the phenomenon of like multiple equilibria does not pop up. Thank you very much for watching this video about the second generation crisis model. Have a nice day and bye-bye.